One of the parts of the male mental health crisis that doesn't get talked enough about. Men are wasting a lot of their time and their relational potential on things that don't give back to them in meaningful ways and then fail them later in life.
How to be patient.
Well, welcome back to How to Be Patient. Today we have a guest that I poached from the APA. So thank you, listeners, for wanting us to come speak there so we could get Dr. Drew Ramsey to come speak on the podcast.
That was easy. I was a big fan of your podcast before the APA. I got DM'd by Samantha on my team. She's like, you should check these two out. I was like, I know about them. I'm hoping to meet them.
That was actually
Our
nuts
reputation
for us.
precedes us.
Okay,
really.
That was nuts for us, though. I told Preston after I went to your panel and rudely asked you a question, probably about nutritional psychiatry. I was like, this person knows about our podcast and knew what it was, which was like, we were shocked that anyone knew what it was.
Oh, she was like live tweeting me during this presentation. She's just texting me like, oh, yo, this guy's really good. Okay, I think I'm going to try to get him on our pod. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Yeah, I'm definitely asking a question. and then she just sent a bunch of like dunking emojis and gifs of basketball players doing like alley-oops. And I was like, I feel like he's coming on the podcast.
You're okay.
Don't
Unrelated,
take the dunk
but
emoji away from me, Margaret. I'm glad that you came to the talk. I'm trying to remember your exact question, but I remember thinking it was a good question. It was about, I think you were about eating disorders and sort of orthorexia and nutritional psychiatry recommendations. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. It was. Yeah, good memory.
So, but it's a treat to be with you all. I mean, I think I'm speaking for all of psychiatry now when I say this, that those of us who are early in social media, we get a big kick out of the folks who are coming in and getting strong influence and putting out a great message about mental health. So it's a treat to be with both of you. We like what you're doing. I like what you're doing. So thank you.
The APA officially likes what we're doing. That's all I need, honestly.
Margaret, how did I become an official APA representative?
We'll discuss all my projections later in the episode.
Okay. All right.
I am going to introduce you, though, for those of our audience who don't know who you are. You are Dr. Drew Ramsey. You are a board-certified psychiatrist, author, and leading voice in nutritional psychiatry and integrative mental health, which is why you are here. And you have a new book out that I believe came out in the spring and that you gifted us a copy of. And by us, I mean I took it from Preston immediately once you gifted it to us at the APA. But now we both have copies. Which is Healing the Modern Brain, 9 Tenets to Build Mental Fitness and Revitalize Your Mind. And we, as I said, are so glad to have you on. Before we talk about anything real, we always do an icebreaker.
Icebreakers are real? Whoa, let's unpack that one.
But yeah,
since we're on the psychoanalyst
I'm
Olympics
on,
here,
the burner this time. I was like, I'm excited for this episode, and it's like, Margaret, what is all this? I guess can we do the icebreaker? I feel so
let's
off.
break some
I feel
ice.
off put. I feel like the two of you together, I'm like, we're playing a Would You Rather game for our icebreaker. This time, which is a new one that we haven't done before. So I made up a bunch of would you rathers based on reading your books and my overconsumption of TikTok. And it is mostly psychiatry related and this podcast related would you rathers. Preston, would you like to answer them as well?
Yeah, I want to answer too. It's better than my icebreaker, which was just telling Drew everything I ate in the last 24 hours.
We'll get to that.
I like that. Let's do that one. That one, because I think everybody went, some people listening know nutritional psychiatry, which this idea of what we eat affects our brain health and how we feel. And it's also like a nice place for us to put time and energy, especially according to the recent research, especially if you have depression. So I would definitely want to hear Preston's whole meal.
Yeah. Hear that, guys?
After Would You Rather. This is you're going to give me a scenario and I've got to pick.
Here's the stinger. Okay.
You can give one sentence for your rationale, but that's it. So I won't make you totally just pick and then be like, too bad. But you have a short sentence that you
sound
can
like
say.
One of my supervisors where eventually they just got frustrated and like, you just have one sentence to tell the patient. That's it. And I want you to come with that sentence.
This is a game.
Right. Okay. All right. Just give me residency flashbacks.
Are you guys both ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll switch off who answers first. So my first would you rather is, and they get I think increasingly hard or unhinged. So would you rather all patients, psychiatry patients in particular, were eating enough fiber or eating enough protein?
I mean, you're asking me which of two essential nutrients I'd prefer. I don't know. That's
Meeting the USDA guidelines.
If you're going to be a little deficient in one of those things, I would say fiber probably is better to be deficient in than protein, because protein deficiency is going to lead to neurotransmitter problems more quickly than the fiber, which will be inadequacy, which you could get close.
Hey, this is a complex sentence.
I haven't hit a comma yet. And mainly be influencing inflammation, which you could address in some other ways, period.
Period. That was a good sentence. Okay, Preston, your answer.
I agree. Period. The two-word sentence there.
I think I would go with fiber. So we'll come back to these questions. But okay, second one. Preston, you can answer this one first so you can't cop out. Would you rather myths about SSRIs disappear from the internet or myths about the danger of fruits and vegetables versus the carnivore-only diet disappear?
Oh, so this is about which misinformation would I like to dispel?
Yes.
Okay. Honestly, I would much rather dispel misinformation about SSRIs, because if people feel fine with SSRIs, I'm fine with them taking their antidepressants in addition to the carnivore diet or whatever weird stuff they want to do. But the thing is, if we dispel the information about the carnivore diet and other weird fad dieting, it's like a hydra and more stuff is going to sprout up. But people are still going to have their, suspicion or skepticism towards SSRIs.
Dr. Ramsey?
So when we're talking about the carnivore diet, we're talking one of our colleagues, actually, Paul Saladino, I think, is a psychiatrist. And so if you're going to actually base this answer on the evidence, looking, and I'm a big fan of SSRIs. I want everybody listening to know I prescribe SSRIs. I was just on a conversation about medication. Like, I'm a psychiatrist. I like psychopharmacology a lot. And I think there's a lot of hope, promise. I'm a fan of SSRIs. The number needed to treat, which is how many patients do Margaret Preston and I have to recommend an SSRI to and have them take it to get one into full remission, is 7 to 9 for an SSRI. The number needed to treat for a Mediterranean diet, according to the SMILES trial, is 4. And so if by dispelling misinformation about carnivore diet and fruits and vegetables draws people into nutritional psychiatry, which one thing, Paul has a huge following. He never wears a shirt. He's a very attractive man. Actually, I will say,
I was not specifically targeting him with this question. I'm more talking about my TikTok feed. So
I guess, but like, who else is there? Like, Paul is the carnivore diet. No one else has popularized it as much as he has. I don't think. 2.1 million followers, smart psychiatrist, great at media. So, yeah, he went in residency with Zach Rosen, which is really weird. When I was a teenager, my aunt lived down the street from Zach Rosen. I had a crush on his older sister. And so it was and I reconnected with Zach recently. And then I learned he was co-resident with Paul. Isn't that wild?
The world is so small.
Yeah.
That's my one-word answer.
So you would like to dispel the misinformation around food if you had to choose between the two?
Yeah, I think so.
Stir excitement about nutritional psychiatry, which has a much more favorable number needed to treat.
And probably lower side effects.
That's my rationale right now. Yeah. And a little better way into psychiatry, because you're going to be more intrigued about creating an alliance with me around food than medicines, even if medicines were a little bit more effective.
Okay. My next question. This is a similarly kind of comparing. So we've done a couple exercise, and I know in your book, Healing the Modern Brain, one of the tenets you talk about is like exercise and movement, as well as nutrition and other elements that we'll get to. But would you rather, if you had a patient with depression and you could wave a magic wand and suddenly they had a robust evidence-based exercise intervention that they were doing and enjoyed versus the SMILES trial to treat their depression? So basically, you could wave a magic wand and we don't have to worry about behaviors or access or whatever. It's like suddenly this intervention definitely without a hitch will happen for them.
We could prescribe them like pills.
Yeah.
Yeah, I give you exercise first because the number needed to treat is 2 for exercise. And so exercise is probably the most powerful brain health intervention that we have. I'd call it movement. Like I do the tenet of movement with the idea that the best recommendation for mental health from a quote unquote exercise perspective is to tell our patients to go dancing. And I go over some of this data in the book because most of my career I've been like, you should exercise 150 minutes a week, you should lift, you should build muscles. And, that's like good advice, but it's not as exciting as specific advice like, hey, do you like to dance? Have you gone to Daybreaker, which is this awesome sober dance party? Have you ever taken like a dance class or a ballroom class? Oh, wow. That helps you socialize and connect a little bit too. So I would go for movement or exercise over nutrition if I could wave a magic wand for patients.
And Preston?
Yeah, I think I would too. But I don't think I'd recommend dancing. I would recommend soccer. And I would say, hey, actually, if you join this co-ed league on Monday nights, we are like really hurting for players right now. And
certain positions,
especially like if you want to come to, it's 5v5, all indoor. It's a turf field, but there is a goalkeeper if you want to play that. Outside of it, it's really just kind of a hodgepodge on the field. But it's fun for the whole family. And there's a very small chance you'll get a ball directly to the face. But it does, and they have ice packs if it happens otherwise.
If like someone's visiting San Antonio and wanted to like play on your team as a goalie, is that like possibility? Or do you need to be like there for the whole season?
Dude,
Hey, he has like a house. You could stay with him. You guys can have a bro
we'll let you know what our
weekend.
schedule is. I've got goalkeeper gloves for you. You just have to get you like a penny or something because I don't have the jersey yet.
Okay.
But yeah, What
if you guys did a men's wellness retreat together?
Yeah, I'm going to be in San Antonio in November. So, we've got the makings of the American Consult Liaison Psychiatry Annual Conference is in San Antonio this year.
We can make that happen. I think, Margaret, I think you're onto something with the men's wellness retreat because the ones I've seen just try to mimic SEAL training and they just like shave their heads and shame them and
you're like, been there, done that.
Bench pressing over again. It's like Margaret's like, I'll do that for free. Yeah, like, yeah.
I do like the like arms linked singing together as like the sun comes up. I like that part of the SEAL training. I think that's like very beautiful. The ones that my limited SEAL training videos.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of guys being dudes,
What's better than
that?
Preston, what would be on a male mental health retreat in your mind? I'm just curious, Mark and Margaret. I'm just is a younger, newer generation of psychiatrists.
Yeah. Margaret, our resident male expert.
For sure. She's dating young men right now. It's like, whoa. I'm not to make assumptions, but it's just like, whoa. Like,
I think it would be so if I think about what promotes general wellness for like all humans, it's going to be like socializing, exercise, good nutrition, like we talked about. But then I would make that specific for guys. So things that makes dudes like to collaborate. So a lot of sports, but also a lot of things that they have to build together. So it'd be like construction and Legos and puzzles.
We're gonna play Work From Home by
and
Dick
then
Harmony.
Interesting. You just like got Caterpillar as a sponsor of our male mental wellness tour. This is like,
dude. Honestly, like
I know it's like then at 11 o'clock, I'm on the backhoe and my other buddy's on the big dozer, and that would be great.
Oh, imagine this: you go up into the mountains, and they're like, "Okay, first task for male mental health is we got to move all this dirt from this pile to that pile, and here's the backhoe."
Or maybe build a shelter. Maybe build a shelter. I like moving dirt a lot and digging holes. I think that's generally actually really.
I'm like laughing because literally as a joke, me and my friend Helen, who was on the podcast as a child psychiatrist, talked about eating disorders. We had this running joke whenever our male friends would say something sexist to us that we would just add things to the list of things we think guys like. And one of them was just dirt. So you're like, what if we got a big pile of dirt?
Just moved it around. Yeah, that's male wellness right there.
What's better than that? Okay, my last question for Would You Rather was, would you rather have Preston or I as a patient? Just kidding. That was actually the last question I wrote down. I was like, I need to be done.
No, that's a tough one. That's a good one. I don't think that's fair at the beginning of the podcast because we haven't really had time together yet. So maybe you all give me a session, and if you remember at the end, I guess it's more judgmental than I like to end sessions, and it's more conclusive than I like to end sessions. But if this podcast were a session, I'll let you know. It might have to do with my current caseload, which is a little impersonal. It's just also
That was a very professional answer. I liked it. Okay, well, we are going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more about your work in nutritional psychiatry and then kind of hone in on your newest book and how you view nutrition as one of these 9 elements you talk about, of kind of in reading it, thinking about the lifestyle elements that aren't medications and aren't a specific psychotherapy for helping our patients, or for people who are listening who aren't therapists, aren't psychiatrists, helping themselves, their loved ones. We will be right back. It is September, and September is Sepsis Awareness Month, and it's more important than ever to talk about a podcast that we think every clinician should know about, which is the Sepsis Spectrum, hosted by critical care educator Nicole Kupchik.
One thing I really like about the podcast is that the goal isn't to be droning on through CME, but it really takes stories from ICU teams, prevention specialists, and sepsis survivors and makes things conversational and easy to access.
You can listen to the Sepsis Spectrum wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch it on Sepsis Alliance's YouTube channel. To learn how you can also earn free nursing CE credits just by listening, visit sepsispodcast.org. Okay, we are back. We are going to start by talking about nutritional psychiatry. I know you already gave us a little bit before I attacked you with weird would you rathers, but for people who don't know, because I don't think a lot of people have access to this nutritional psychiatry understanding, how would you describe the field at this point?
I think the field is now in a robust place, lots of data, lots of interest, still probably the best kind of most palatable intervention we have. Let's just talk with the definition, start with the definition.
Like palatable.
And it got me interested early. So I'm a farm boy. I grew up in Indiana. I tell some of the story in the book. And then I moved to New York City and did residency at Columbia and stayed in New York and had a period of my life where I was like living in these two distinct worlds: urban New York City life as a psychiatrist, which I adore and I love, and then this really rural existence in Southern Indiana. And so nutritional psychiatry kind of for me is born from being in these two places and also seeing what's happening to our patients in terms of what they're eating, a lot of the misinformation they're getting, and the opportunity that was coming out in the data. I define nutritional psychiatry really in a straightforward way. For me, it's food. And for some of my colleagues, they're interested in supplements. Okay. Lots of people are telling you to take supplements. I don't find enough people in mental health who are talking to you about your food. And when we approach food from a mental health standpoint, almost always we think are thought of as experts in eating disorders. And just like for sure there's a lot of pathology in eating, there's also, I think, a lot of opportunity in health and what I call eater evolution that needs to happen. So simply nutritional psychiatry is the use of food to optimize brain health. Like, what should you eat to have the healthiest brain? That's the question I started with. Kind of when I was where you all are, right? Sort of in residency, I was a vegetarian. Some data was just coming out. Omega-3s were like a big new thing. So the use of food to optimize brain health and to treat and prevent mental health concerns. And I say concerns meaning that if you don't have symptoms, but your grandfather died by suicide after a catatonic, horrible psychotic depression.
Yeah.
That's on your mind. That's in your genes. You're thinking about that. And we want people in a much more active stance and kind of obviously being more responsible with what we understand about ourselves and our families and how that can direct us towards eating differently than really most people are eating or than a lot of people are eating these days. Mm-hmm. And so that's nutritional psychiatry and a little bit of kind of where it came from and what it is. The idea isn't to replace medication. The idea isn't to, say that all mental health problems are because we're eating, horrible chemicals in our foods. But it is to recognize there's a lot of research now that changing how you eat changes your brain health, changes how you feel, changes outcomes with depression, anxiety, ADHD, a number of our kind of most disabling mental health disorders.
No, I think what I really liked in both of your books that I've read so far is that there was less of a pathologizing or further kind of fear-inducing. Reading it didn't induce shame, I think. And I don't think anyone writes books to induce shame, but I think the tone you took is like, how do we build strengths around this and like use people's creativity and their family backgrounds, their cultural backgrounds to help them slowly build up a different way of evolving, as you're saying, into different types of eaters without focusing on pathology first or something that is scary and bad first, which I think is for a lot of lifestyle changes, the place a lot of people get information online is like, did you like it's tension grabbing to have someone be like, did you know that this is really wrong and bad? And like people don't want to tell you this. And you did not use that in your books, at least my reading of them.
Yeah, if I was feeling shame, I knew that you were going to write "be kind to yourself" at the end of the paragraph and have a little section about grace and forgiveness there.
Yeah, that's been a big theme for me. Something I learned from patients early on. I remember actually very distinctly. I was thinking about this patient earlier today, and I didn't know why. Been treated for years. Her name was Meg, and she was this wonderful woman. Really long, horrible course with depression. I just remember she came in once, and she's basically like, you're kind of new at this, but you're sort of a downer because you just only want to talk about like my illness and how sick I am, and I live in this fucking depression my whole life. And I need some more positivity out of you. And it wasn't like an avoidant thing, which I think oftentimes our field is like, oh, if you want to talk about positivity or strength or your pesto recipe,
there's the door.
Your weekend plan, like you're being avoidant. You're not, you're not talking about real stuff. But I think all of us need encouragement and support. I think we all respond to that in a way that's really helpful. I think we want that from our clinicians and our therapists when they see our strengths, especially when we don't see them. It's in some ways part of our role is giving voice to the strengths we see. I call it for my patients. I call it the relational potential a lot of times because I feel it. As I sit with them and I am having like a wonderful relational experience. When you're sitting with somebody who maybe is really anxious, really shy about sharing themselves or being vulnerable or being in a relationship, it's important, I think, for us to see that and see our patients' strengths.
Yeah.
I'm glad that came out in this book. That was like, I don't know, this is a little bit of a different book for me. The others are all just about food, and this one was much more personal about this kind of idea of mental fitness. I think came from what I do with patients, which is I love talking about food, but it's a piece of it. There are these other, along with meds and psychotherapy, these other things that I always find myself getting back to. I find these tenets. People are like, how'd you pick them? It's like they're the stuff that we all agree works. Like we might argue about SSRIs, but like nobody's going to argue about sleep. But
Right.
a lot of times we don't kind of link. Just like it's really amazing. People don't link their food to their mental health. Like when you tell people, hey, your depression risk is dictated by your nutritional intake. It's like, wow. And it's like, or like, hey, if you eat a Mediterranean diet added onto your SSRI, like 30% of that population will go into full remission from their depression.
Right.
And so we also don't like these other tenets. Exercise we do to our mood somewhat, but like sleep or connection and to really get explicit, like, hey, this is where you need to spend your time to have great mental health.
I wonder if we could ask a little, or I could ask a little bit, like, what made you? It sounds like from your clinical experience, you were seeing these things emerge. And I remember talking to you a little bit at APA about writing this book and kind of moving from more of the focus you've had in nutritional psychiatry to broader than just nutrition. What inspired you to be like, okay, I need to, do the very difficult thing of writing a book about this and move away from what you've into a broader field, I guess, than what you've been doing or writing about? Like, what were you seeing that was like, this needs to be out there?
I think is what drives all of us. It sounds maybe a little cheesy, but it was the desire to be authentic. I wanted what I was being seen as, and which is really, largely been food has been my platform. And that's been somewhat intentional. It's fun, it's tasty, it's visual, it's easy to Instagram, and it's really compelling and exciting to people in a way of talking about our mental health. It also fits with my narrative. I grew up on a farm. I like to grow food. I like to cook food. But when I sit with patients, these other elements just kept standing out. And also you see them work, and it's hard to ignore that because in our field, especially where you are, the part of our field that I'm in private practice. And so, it's not like being part of a research program where there's a lot of data and metrics and rating scales, or even part of academic kind of program where there's, a certain way things are done. It's a very, personal way of practicing medicine. It's just you. And so and I say this because when you see people get better, it's just really clear. And that's true in all of those settings too, I guess. But as a someone in private practice, you really pay attention because that, like, if you, I don't know, I put this like, if you don't help people take steps towards getting better, you're not going to be working in the field very long. And so that's where these tenets stick out. You see people get into relationships and form connections, and they're just beaming, and you're like, oh my gosh, you were so ill. Like, we were thinking about hospitalizing you last week, and now, like, you're great, or at least you're happy, or at least you have this smile that I haven't seen forever. Like, what was that? And it's like, I don't know. I just, like, I met this guy, and we started talking, and it's like, wow. And you see someone just go, like, you all have seen this clinically, right? Just beside themselves with insomnia. Or this happens sometimes. I'll see patients and they didn't get their morning meds and they're on a stimulant, and you're like, oh no, like, what's, like, just like totally, like, volume down, like, what's going on? And it's like, oh, I missed my bed this morning. It's like, oh, okay, like, because there's there's that sense of really paying very close attention to what lights people up. And these are the things that I felt over and over again. I would see light people up, and whether they need meds or whether they need a deep psychotherapy about some maybe trauma or a strange development or, things in their character, like, these things always help make that work go better. And I don't use always lightly.
That's a heavy always. One thing that, like, strikes me about these tenets is how they all are, like, united through food.
Oh, what are you seeing, Preston?
Almost like it's the point of the book. But I think my point is that, like, fundamentally, like, if humans want to connect with other humans, it's by, like, sharing food. It's like the earliest way in which you can, like, build trust with another person is to, like, take a bite of something. Or we can go there too.
Let's not get into breastfeeding right now. There's a lot of lactation in my house, and I have a really deep relationship with that process and breast milk. And I find it really strange that, like, a lot of people are repulsed by breast milk, or when you ask people if they've, like, tried their breast milk, or their husbands tried their breast milk, it's like, I don't know, it's sort of strange. People act like it's gross. It's really weird.
Preston,
like
how does this conversation make you feel?
I actually, my mind went blank and I was just picturing a bunch of breast milk, like, in my fridge. And then it made me think of that. There's, like, a My Strange Addiction where all these, like, bodybuilders were drinking breast milk and they were getting, like, imported from other states.
Oh,
so
yeah, that's actually the biggest
like
consumer.
My train of thought. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the underground
strange market.
Yeah, I guess so. That's
Next
if you're lucky, Preston. Like, if you're lucky, right? If you end up with a freezer full of breast milk, I don't know. I think a lot about, like, what are actual markers of modern masculine success,
Mm-hmm.
and I think freezer of breast milk you haven't purchased is kind of because
I'm saving that
like
for the wellness retreat.
partnered with you, and I don't know. Maybe it's maybe not the best for. We should move on to other tenets. I would say that they're kind of going to derail us.
I think ultimately my point is that, like, and maybe this is, like, the entire thesis of your book that I'm regurgitating to you, but every time you engage with one of those tenets, it returns you to food in some way. Like, if I'm exercising a lot, usually if you're, like, on a team or running together with people, you then go eat afterwards. So then you're fostering connection, and not even necessarily, like, the type of food that it is, but it's always comes back to food as medicine of any nature, but then you can change the quality of the food to improve it on top of that.
Preston, I think I liked you initially because I could sense you were going to be a good psychiatrist somehow, because I've actually not ever thought of that, to be really honest with you. It's like a really beautiful interpretation. I really appreciate that. I really, quite honest, I thought about this as a book where I'm trying to, like, show people I'm more than just food and nutritional psychiatry, and I really like that
but
you
it's
see
all
food in all of it.
It's like,
Well,
and that's okay. Like, that's, like, what's life is. Like,
just
actually,
one
like,
thing,
food
bro.
No, but really, like whenever I'm reading a book, a novel, and I see two characters break bread, I'm like communion, camaraderie, they're eating together. It's like fundamental to the human experience, and that's like what a lot of those tenets felt like to me, rather than like 9 pillars lined up. There's 9 of them, right? Am I going crazy? Yeah,
Yes.
9
They're
pillars
9.
lined up. It's really just kind of like 9 vertices that are all connected, or 8 vertices that connect in the center through food. That's how I see it. It's like a star,
I appreciate that.
like yarn. Yeah. So anyways, that's that's my interpretation.
I like the interpretation.
One of the things that you talked about in both books, but like the neurophysiology or the studies we have on different elements of nutrition and how they impact people's mental illnesses or mental health and prevention. I think something that I'm curious your thoughts on as someone who spent a lot of your career in nutritional psychiatry is that there's been a lot of conversations, especially knowing you were in New York and I think at Columbia, from the therapeutic lens of like what food means to people and, you know, why people eat certain things, why certain people binge or don't binge. And there could be a million reasons for that. But I wonder from your positive viewpoint, if there are ways therapeutically you bring up with people their strengths around food or their patterns of eating, their creativity with eating, their history of relating to their food community that you talked about in the how to eat to beat anxiety and depression.
So, Margaret, I think there are a few things in here. First of all, everybody listening, we're going to tell you the good stuff to eat for your mental health. And it revolves, I've like my little fun rhyme: seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. Rainbow celebrations, don't forget the fermentations. But that was added by Catherine Roberts, one of our colleagues. But I'll say there are certain food categories that have more what's called nutrient density. And nutrient density is really a principal idea of nutritional psychiatry, which is that when we just think about calories, when we just think about eating disorders, we're not helping patients fill their plate. We're not directing people towards what I would call are just foods that, again, have more nutrients for mental health, right? Serotonin's made from tryptophan. What foods have the most tryptophan? None of us seem to know. Everyone says like turkey, that's just not true. Right? Or magnesium. We know magnesium's amazing for our sleep. It's great. Everybody loves magnesium. We all have like 6 different types of magnesiums in our supplement cabinet. But when you ask people like, what's your favorite, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 magnesium foods? Because like this mineral's so important, right? We'd all have some. It's like people don't know, patients don't know, psychiatrists, doctors don't know. Things like folate. I remember asking like a Harvard-educated colleague, like, favorite food sources of folate, and it's like none. And so that really intrigued me as an opportunity, but also just like a strange lesson about brain health. Like we all, it's sort of like it's like mental health awareness. We like to talk a lot about it, but when it comes time to doing things about it and doing some of the obvious things and evidence-based things about it, we kind of struggle. And we don't know just some of the most basic and like if this was a test, hey, you've got a brain to keep it, you just got to pass this test every year. It's a simple test, just like basic stuff, like simple questions. What are some great sources of protein for your brain? Where do you find vitamin E, one of the fat soluble nutrients that's really important for optimal brain health? It would be great. Everybody would know more about it.
When you were saying like it's a test, simple test.
I think the basic point is in asking some simple questions about nutrition, you get a great sense of how people nourish and care for themselves. And there's just a profound lack of knowledge that we don't, if every year you had to take a test to keep your brain and it was about the basic nutrients your brain would need and everyone had this information, we'd be a lot mentally healthier. Like the data is super clear about that. And if you look at, for example, the Nurses' Health Study, which looked at ultra-processed foods, so the nurses who were eating the most ultra-processed foods in their diet had a 50% increased risk of depression. It's just like very much in the data. You look at a study of 10,000 students in Spain. Those students during college, the ones who ate a more Mediterranean-style diet, actually it's just the top half of the class, they had a 35 to 50% decreased risk of depression over the 4.5 years that the study was done. And so there's just this really kind of clear way we want people to, when you're asking about like strengths, I want to hear about the food categories and celebrate what you're doing well. right? When I ask about leafy greens, if you tell me, I don't know, any you saute greens, you like salads, you haven't tried them recently, but you love pesto. I want to try and celebrate those things. You're a good seafood eater, right? You are paying attention to processed food in your diet. You know about fermented foods. And anything that I see, there are a lot of, especially younger people, I treat a lot of younger men, right, where they actually, really pay attention to their nutrition, have some cooking skills. Um, and I do this simply with a nutritional psychiatry history, which for me is around understanding what it's like for you. What's a day in your life as an eater like? You wake up, how are you feeling? What do you eat for breakfast? Like, what else? Most people have 3 or 4 go-to breakfasts, right? What's lunch like? Especially, you all are in residency. There's a handful of places you're eating lunch. There's a handful of orders that you have. Pretty quickly in these kind of hearing about snacks. Then, hey, what are the afternoon snacks? Coffee? What do you have in your coffee? Dinner? Right? If you push people to just give a little more detail, a few more examples, you now have a kind of broad brushstroke of their dietary pattern. And you're asking about like how nutritional psychiatry works, along with nutrient density. Another big kind of lesson for me in the data was we spend way too much time obsessed with single nutrients, more B12 or macronutrients, more protein. And we don't spend enough time thinking about dietary pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And that along with the leafy greens, you're probably eating pizza, you're probably having a few beers on Friday, right? That your kind of overall broad brushstroke dietary pattern, looking at these food categories, which is how nutritional psychiatry works. What are your rainbow vegetables? What do they look like? Where do I hear them in your dietary history? Oh, wow, I didn't hear any. Or I just had a patient start taking a food journal. You look for like, there's seafood or there's not, right? There's a lot of fast food or there's not. And so that's kind of how I try and get a sense, again, to celebrate the wins, to have people say it themselves. Psychiatry is kind of in some ways easy where, people come in and say, hey, how you doing? And they'll share. Same thing, you ask people like, tell me some of the challenges for you right now and what you're eating. Again, those 2 great things to add on to interpretations in mental health right now, and the one that's harder for therapists in here with me. But, what are you challenged with? So you say it out loud, and then there's some accountability right away that's starting out.
I have a million thoughts, but I also know, like, for Preston and I's even short so far careers and training, the people I work with has been mostly like women in transition age points and eating disorders, and perinatal, not eating disorders necessarily. And so my population bias is pretty heavily in that population, where I see a lot of anxiety, perfectionism, self-criticism, and specifically body image stuff, not just in eating disorders. And so I think leaning is to help liberate them from food rules, for like that they need to eat enough, and then we'll start getting into some of these other parts of optimizing. But I'm wondering for Preston, like, who has a different lived experience than I do of being in like
Mhm.
sports, being in like a military background, what kind of thoughts and question comes up with the populations you work with, and just because I feel like our population, we've talked about this on air a lot, the populations we treat are pretty different. And so I have my certain things I push back at vocally, but I'm wondering for you how this lands in treating more men, because frankly, I don't treat men. Now I treat children. So
So it's interesting you should say that, because I really kind of am divided into 2 populations. So I treat like active duty military on like our local bases, and then also I treat kind of basically the general psychiatric population of South San Antonio, which is a lot of like impoverished people with pretty poor access to food. And San Antonio is not a desert in and of itself, but it has plenty of food deserts in the surrounding areas. So rather than it being like almost like an eating disorder problem with a lot of those patients, it's really just about like making sure that they can consistently have any access to food, or like being able to like connect them with case management so they can get food stamps so they can find something to eat. So usually I'm not like talking with them as much about like the quality of their food. If I'm just like, as long as you can like find something to eat, that's awesome. And then on the other side, we have these military members who are actually very resistant to medication for a lot of other like political reasons. So to give you some kind of more context, if you're an active duty pilot and you're like considered like a flyer, is what's called in the military. If you're put on an SSRI, you have to be flightless or you're grounded, not allowed to fly an airplane for up to 90 days because of they want to monitor for mental stability. So a lot of people are reluctant to seek out diagnoses and also give diagnoses for things like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, because they can be career-ending diagnoses to give. But that means that this is a population that's highly motivated, very capable, and willing to try things outside of medication that require more effort. So these are people that are really interested in using exercise and nutrition, those kind of changes to modify their lifestyle. So I've like actually felt like I don't have enough tools to counsel people on all of their like nutritional aspects to like optimize their mental health. So it's one reason why I'm excited about this podcast and these books, because I do have this population lined up that like would very much benefit from nutritional psychiatry among like everything else.
I think one of the professional accomplishments I was proud of is after my second book, 50 Shades of Kale, came out, which is like a silly book about kale. Um, it's a great kale cookbook, but we launched National Kale Day, and for 1 year we partnered with the Department of Defense, and every military-based commissary in the United States had lots of kale, had National Kale Day posters that we printed, had kale recipes that they were giving out.
I've eaten kale in the cafeteria.
And so so it's wonderful it's great that you're working with our military and our servicemen and women. And I certainly appreciate those comments. I think just to share with everybody in terms of the population I treat, I guess in residency, it was a lot of students at Columbia. I worked during the end of residency and right afterwards in a community service in a community mental health clinic where we ran a day program. So a large kind of caseload of patients with bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, chronic paranoid schizophrenia. And that's actually when I first started understanding and learning about the importance of talking about food. It was a long time ago, and it was, sorry, I've got to burn a doodle here. Do you want to say hi to the podcast? Right. I wanted to ask, you're talking about uh, uh, the different populations you both treat. And you're talking about, I think, a very important idea. Our colleague Pooja Lakshmi, in his book Real Self-Care, talks about this, kind of liberating women from all of the kind of unnecessary and often expensive and time-expensive work and wellness work that actually often doesn't benefit them. And a lot of the food rules that come from a very kind of patriarchal notion of how women should eat. And I'm wondering if what's the difference, kind of rules and values. Because like I wouldn't say in my house I have like rules necessarily, like eat what you want to eat, but I think there's some like values that for the most part we try to adhere to. I don't know, it's like an 80-20 rule, but like trying to be more plant forward, more vegetables, trying to have our meats and seafoods be of a certain quality, trying to limit moments of food insecurity, which is a great point you brought up, Preston. Like your nutritional psychiatry role is assessment, encouragement. Food insecurity increases the risk of depression in the elderly by 10 times. Food insecurity in adolescents increases the risk of a suicide attempt, I think, by 4 times. So in terms of like a powerful intervention for a lower socioeconomic status population that's struggling with food insecurity, it's one of those things that, nutritional psychiatry is also like more magnesium, more omega-3s, more seafood, greens, nuts, and beans. Mm-hmm. And like, that's all important stuff. But underneath it is kind of, for me, calories. Started in is calories. It started with community psychiatry, which is access, which is serving our patients more vegetables at lunch to help model that and help make sure they had access. Connecting people. There was a great workshop I once went to, which was in Indianapolis, a woman who was working with different homeless shelters and running cooking classes where they'd basically take different ingredients from different things that they had, and they'd kind of create a new meal out of it. And so if you had a little onions and a little taco kit and, I don't know, something else that maybe doesn't feel like it would go together. And it was like a workshop around creativity in a lot of ways and using what you have, but also, again, as you said, just about getting enough calories.
I do feel like one of the core parts that is missed, and sometimes because you can't profit necessarily off of teaching people cooking skills in the way you can from selling them a product that's like a one-time buy or multiple times buy, but that people think, and you talk about this in your book, like and I think I've experienced this earlier, and then in learning how to cook and taking cooking classes in adulthood, that it's not that they don't like certain foods, it's just that they've only had one iteration of a food, and that it's not you have to force yourself to like things you don't like for the rest of your life. It's like, oh, you actually have some skill deficits, and this could be a really good this could be something you can actually learn easily and enjoy.
Like, I hated cauliflower until I discovered boiling water. You know,
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
like now it's so good.
You're like, and then I lit up the fire in my cave.
Are you like a mashed cauliflower guy? Is it like a riced cauliflower, Preston?
I haven't riced in restaurants, but I'll mash it up and then I add a little bit of like Tabasco sauce, maybe some buffalo sauce, as you get like those vegan wings.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty good. Yeah.
A vegan wing, so like a cauliflower wing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
I've not had that. Okay.
Can I ask you guys a question that is it overlaps with your like the male mental health stuff and then like nutritional psychiatry? I feel like I often see male influencers when they come up on my social media. It's like optimize this, that, and the third about food, and then they'll be eating like an entire plate of like they'll have like rice, cauliflower, chicken, and then like hot sauce on it, and they're like not even in a cut. They're just like, can you talk about that male culture of influence on fitness online? I don't know. I don't know how to format this in a question, but it's so foreign to me, but I feel like I see it come up.
Is it a stylistic thing in what you're seeing the men present food as?
Yeah.
Or is it like the combo like big meat, carb, Tabasco?
Well, it's like male orthorexia in some ways, I think. Like it's like a more male-centric orthorexia that's like you
Why
see
don't you
like female
define
fitness
orthorexia for our audience, Margaret.
Okay.
If you could.
Yes,
Such a
yeah. So orthorexia, not technically in the DSM, but is kind of like a rigid fixation to the point of, in some ways, dysfunction, if you wanted to call it a disorder, but kind of fixation on certain rules and clean eating that can have many definitions depending on the diet you define it by. That, I guess, eventually, if you were going to call it orthorexia, usually it's getting in their way and it's not totally. It can be egocentric, but it's making it so that some other functioning is hard for them. If I'm seeing them and I'm treating them.
Mhm.
And so I feel like the things I see online are like I feel like you see female fitness or health and wellness influencers, and they have like these big plates of like they might be eating small portions, but they'll have like colorful foods, lots of vegetables. They're like eating dainty things and not eating a lot of meat. And then I see like male influencers, and it'll be like rice and boiled chicken and taking creatine and like, which I'm not against creatine, but like it's so different of the presentation of like healthy
like
eating
the
for wellness.
board with like my cut up meat.
Yeah.
And like a stick of broccoli, maybe.
Well, so I have some thoughts, but I'll let Dr. Ramsey answer first on this one.
Oh, I don't know, Preston. You go first. I don't know. I want to hear from you. You're.
And I do love speaking on behalf of all men. So here we go again.
Speak on the young ones. I'll take the middle-aged ones. You take the young ones.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, what I've noticed is a common theme with a lot of these male mental health or fitness influencers is a lot of what they're trying to sell is discipline to their base. So essentially their sales pitches, you don't have everything that you want in life. Like you don't have the job you want, you don't have the money you want, you don't have the girl you desire because you're undisciplined. So I'm going to show you a model of what true discipline looks like. And that's not something you can display easily because discipline is like it's a continuous choice daily, right? So instead they show ways that you can deprive yourself of pleasure and lock in and grind and things like that. So in this whole narrative that they build of self-deprecation, that they encourage like weird things like they're like, stop looking at porn, stop jerking off, don't worry about chasing women, stop drinking alcohol, fucking like don't breathe at night, like tape your nose or tape your mouth with this shit so you can like breathe through your nose. And then on top of that, like no fancy processed meals, like you're going to deprive yourself of that kind of pleasure too, and that's what's going to bring you to salvation. So I don't see it as much as like very centered around the food itself, but fitting into this larger narrative of if you want the things that you hope to get out of life, you have to suffer now. And you have to deprive yourself in some way. And like, would you rather suffer the pain of hard work or suffer the pain of regret is like the pitch they always give. So I think you're just kind of looking through the window and seeing one part of this whole factory process that men are being sold right now.
I think men are missing the ability to listen well, but maybe I should turn that into a disciplined thing. Like, you give me 60 minutes of hardcore active listening right now, young man. What did she say? What did she say?
Well,
Deprive
this retreat
yourself of
coming to
talking
you in
about
San
yourself.
Antonio.
Right.
For 10 seconds.
Two of them, one of them.
I know you froze.
Yeah.
That's a great take of the discipline, because I think there is a notion, it really backfires for men. You know, when I think about what I do as a psychiatrist, I am an agent of hedonism, right? Because the biggest pleasure people get in life is through emotional connections with other human beings, right? Friends, partners, lovers, mentors, right? Not in the same person, but right. We love these connections. We thrive on them, and. So the idea that this discipline and deprivation, right, where you're focused on draining yourself of pleasure, it doesn't work. It's kind of where stoicism has been taken to an extreme. Some stoic ideas are really important for men today. Men do lack some discipline. Men do lack drive and purpose. Men are struggling to live in the, I would say, newer, better, more interesting parts of their brain. There's a way that male culture can really get boiled down to like meat, sports, porn, misogyny, in a way that is very is one of the parts of the male mental health crisis that doesn't get talked enough about. Men are wasting a lot of their time and their relational potential on things that don't give back to them in meaningful ways, and then fail them later in life. So discipline, yeah, it's important. I'm definitely a product of discipline, but discipline around pleasure deprivation, that's not an effective strategy because there's no dopamine in it. First of all, right? It's like raw dogging. It's like, okay, or you could read a book, or you could like talk to the girl next to you, be nice, like, or you could like write an email to someone in your family you need to connect. Like, there's a lot of things you could do at that time besides stare at the map. So,
Like, as someone, I make jokes, but I don't. As someone I don't have the lived experience of being a man, a young man, and as someone
You
who's
heard it here first, guys. Margaret does
very
not have the lived experience of being a man.
womanism and feminism centered spaces. I don't know. I think also very frankly, like, you experience enough as like a young female doctor from some male patients, and even if it's a small amount of male patients who sexualize you, it makes you not want to work. I think like that, to me, that's part of the mental health stuff and why I don't treat as many men is that, like, I have had male patients be very inappropriate towards me. And it's like, this is, I don't know. It's like, I've always wanted to treat eating disorders, and that just happens to be the population. But it's also like, who can I be heard as like a woman speaking in these kind of male spaces? But
yeah, not sexually objectified. I mean, I think there's also a way that in the more kind of traditional, old school model of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy with a, generally male therapist and female patient, right? That erotic transference is always encouraged to talk about, expected, a little titillating, right? But when you swap it and suddenly you're with a male patient who's sexually objectifying you, you're in essentially a very private, quiet room. It doesn't feel that way at all. So I do suspect that as you get more time in the clinical space, and really you're talking about a clinical challenge, which is sitting with men, and one of the major barriers they're having to mental health is their tendency to sexually objectify women and treat you as primarily like a cute woman who maybe, if they're lucky, like they could go out with you sometime and maybe kiss you. And it's just like, you're a physician, you're there to take care of their mental health, and very quickly you're experiencing right away the repulsiveness of that.
Mhm.
And so I wonder if over time, that's what I get interested in, sitting with men who struggle with a variety of things like this, where especially as you sit with the women and you really like them, you see like the great potential in them, you see that they're there in therapy, and then sometimes you hear some things coming out of their mouth,
Mm-hmm.
it surprises you. And I guess for me, I think that's also like, that's where countertransference, how we feel about our patients, is so important, right? Of just
Mm-hmm.
that moment right then when you kind of the record scratches and you see the more grating side of their masculinity.
I think you're correct. I think in doing child now, I work with family systems, and it's easier for me to work with when there's less of the one-on-one, and like figuring out how to make a family system work and working with younger men in like childhood, I think poses less of that. I think there's also the kind of issue as a female trainee of how much at what point do you say, like, not just like, is this something to work through, but like, how do I spend my time when there's an access problem across psychiatry? And like, does this make a sustainable career to, I mean, I had a resident when I was a med student who I rotated with who was like, you know, gave a presentation on the risk of female trainees being like stalked and things like that. And I don't know. I don't think there's a clear answer. And I think also there's a lot to be said about what therapy across gender lines can do for people in many different directions in terms of positives.
Food for thought, really.
You were
It's funny
pulling
when you're
that
talking
one.
about like people that you, it's all coming back to food for precedent. When you think about like your population, I say one of the populations that I've been fortunate to treat are matriarchs. And these are women who often are running families, complex family systems, taking care of parents, taking care of their partner in a certain way, and but you see that there's a way that the family system and the mental health of the family system really depends on them. They're the ones paying most attention to it. There's the ones who are orienting other people in that system. I think those are all really important questions also that have really shifted since I trained Margaret, in terms of, more and more residents like yourselves who are, on social media, having platforms, putting content out there. Certainly the gender differences and the kind of fears and concerns about that. Um, do you think it's also one of the things about female patients speaking with men? One of the things that about these issues that's been interesting in my career is that boundary that we have as psychiatrists, and how that actually allows us to have relationships with women that are really different. Like by proxy, I've spent, I don't know, 20 to 30,000 hours, not by proxy, but just by like my career, like listening to women, and like needing to listen like really carefully, honor what they say, be like thoughtful of how I talk back. A-
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's an experience, I mean, men certainly have in the workplace, but it's kind of, I think about my patients really as my boss, right? Because I do just work for them. Um, and so it's been, speaking with different women across the lifespan has certainly been one of the, I don't know, one of the places I think I've learned the most in my career.
Yeah.
As a therapist, one of the ways that you can end up helping men is you hear a very unfiltered version, if you're doing the job right over time, from women about kind of real challenges that men have. And so then as you're working with young men, like what I told a patient recently, I was like, he canceled his session. He's asking, like, am I going to get double charged? I'm like, I'm from the Midwest. I think you're canceling this session to try and be a better boyfriend. And that seems like a treatment goal we've had. So I don't think I could double charge you. It's yeah, it's a really wonderful place in some ways to learn about more about gender dynamics and how they play out and how people experience them.
In working with women, it has been interesting over time. I mean, again, only over the last 4 years, but to hear about the things and hear about the complaints at times or dynamics that are happening, but then also to hear how the disempowerment that they've internalized themselves as part of this is like where our work ends up being often, right? Like it's our work with a patient is often never, it's very rarely all about changing someone, some bad actor or bad guy in their life, and more about, I feel like my pattern has been, ends up being about, and why do you think you like deserve this? Like, why are we staying here, or why are we not doing anything or speaking up about it? which I think is also part of the like dynamics of how these things continue to happen.
Yeah, it's easier not to confront people. I mean, that's one of the things you all are learning in training, right? That you have a certain moment in a session, somewhere between minute 22 and minute 42 usually. And that's your opportunity to say something and to confront someone in a way that works, also, which is different than just confronting people. And so that, confront folks in a way that helps them heal, or, this kind of idea. How do you, empower someone to speak up in a relationship, to give voice to something that, might lead to a fight or a disagreement or even a breakup. But, so yeah, it's that's a very fun thing about the work you all are starting out on, as I'm sure you're experiencing. I still work with a couple of patients I treated in residency, and it's really just an incredible treat that you get to know someone really during a very large chunk of their life cycle. So you both see the kind of how illnesses can progress, but also what happens when people get better. And so it's or this type of thing is, Margaret, as you're talking, I'm thinking like, wow, I wonder as you sit and find a place of safety with these, like the men that you're talking about, right? And find that place of, a little bit of medical authority, a little bit of whatever it is you find, right? That let's just say in one of these situations that you're able to like help one of these men. There's also some way that that's so informative, both experientially, but also in your treatments with women of like, having a space to kind of sit with that and having an empowerment already by some of our role. So
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know if I've talked about some of this, and then we'll go to break in a second, and we have one short segment where we wanted you to help me and Preston make our lives more by your pillars. Help us, because we did some challenges from your book.
We got to get back to mental fitness. Otherwise, people are like, it's like better the 10. It's like burn
Our
a
listeners
doodle.
like this. Our listeners like this.
Okay, all right. Everybody.
We talked about if free will exists on a recent episode that I think is out at this point when they hear this one. That was like, we talked about free will with Allison Stoner, who was a Disney Channel child star and now advocates for mental health in Hollywood with child stars. So like our listeners are down for
Okay,
our art.
Okay.
But I always say my dad is a primary care. He's retired now, but he's a primary care doctor. And I think, to your point of how do you see yourself in these, my dad, like, super funny, goofy dude who just like also was raised as a farmer and then went into primary care. So I think a lot of my like feminist thought on these things with patients and with boys and men actually comes from having someone who is like, yeah, this is how you should be. This is how girls and women are. Like, he was the one that was like, you can be a doctor if you want to be. So I don't know. It's very interesting.
You have a standard for men because you had a good one in your life.
Yeah. A deeply unserious good one. Okay, well, speaking of men fixing our lives, we are going to take a break. And then Preston did a food diary, and I tried some of your recipes, but we're going to see if you can help us optimize our mental health via your pillars in our last segment.
That's what I'm here for. And by proxy, I hope everybody listening is going to learn something about optimizing their mental fitness too.
Optimization. Hey, listeners. We went long. Both of us did.
Had a yap session.
I think we talk for another hour after we say we're going to go to the break. So what we're going to do is just break this up into 2 episodes.
We're going to take a week-long break.
And the nice thing is we've had plenty of time to meander and talk about male mental health and the global picture around nutritional psychiatry. But when we do come back for this second episode, we'll start to get to more of our personal relationship with food. So I have a food diary that we're going to break down. And Margaret, you had some recipes that you did.
I tried some of his recipes from his book, but we do focus on Preston's food life a little bit more than mine.
I'm an open book. What can I say?
Cookbook.
Really. So that's where we'll stop for now. But if you do like these 2-parters, please let us know. If you want us to get more authors on or find more niche topics within psychiatry, we like doing this, so we want to hear how you feel about it. You can always come chat with us at our Human Content Podcast family. We're on Instagram, TikTok at Human Content Pods. You can contact us directly at howtobepatientpod.com, or you can find more of me and Margaret on our respective social media platforms. I'm at It's Presro, Margaret's at Bad Art Every Day. I've been making some bad art myself every day, painting by numbers, about 40% done with my most recent one. Shout out to everyone leaving all the nice comments. We really appreciate it, and we read them even if we don't answer. So please keep us in your ears and keep sending your thoughts.
I went on an answering fest on your YouTube comments for all of season 1 the other day.
I've been finding the comments on Spotify, and I'm trying to answer them too.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, people comment on there? Yeah, so you can comment on Spotify, and we look for them now. So it's like, whoa, we're social on Spotify these days. Thanks again for listening. We're your hosts, Preston Roche and Margaret Duncan. Our executive producers are me, Preston Roche, Margaret Duncan, Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brooke. Our editor and engineer is Jason Partizo. Our music is by Omer Benzvi. To learn more about our program disclaimer and ethics policy, submission verification and licensing terms, and our HIPAA release terms, go to howtobepatientpod.com or reach out to us at howtobepatient@human-content.com with any questions or concerns. How to Be Patient is a human content production. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more of us, or if you want to see, this is Lilac, she's my cat. She's going to be waving her hand at one of the floating boxes, which will lead to more episodes. Lilac, point to the other episodes. Lilac doesn't know what the internet is, but I swear they're there. They probably exist for real. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pet Lilac, and then I'm going to go dance in the background.